Welcome For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. For the first time since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, abortion is once again legal in Wisconsin. That's according to a Dane County judge who ruled on Tuesday that the state's 1849 law, widely thought to outlaw abortion, applied instead to feticide. Now, reaction quickly poured in this week. Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin had already worked to reopen their abortion clinics in Madison and Milwaukee ahead of this week's ruling. They now say that they will soon reopen their remaining clinic in Sheboygan. We turn first this week to Michelle Velasquez, Planned Parenthood Wisconsin's advocacy director, about how this ruling impacts the group's work. We spoke earlier this week. And thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So what's your initial reaction to the judge's decision tonight?
So the decision is really consistent with the court's earlier rulings. And so it really is the decision that we've anticipated coming from the court. But of course, we're still really thrilled to have this resolved at least in Dane County Circuit Court, and are hopeful that the court's decision really instills maybe some confidence in other healthcare providers and systems around the state, and offers them the reassurance that abortion is not illegal in Wisconsin and that they can provide the full scope of reproductive health care to their patients without fear of prosecution.
So your organization had already started performing abortions in Milwaukee and Dane counties. How will tonight's decision affect your work going forward?
So going forward, we hope to resume services as soon as possible in Sheboygan, which is another county we provided in prior to the Dobbs decision. And when we resumed, we focused on Milwaukee and Madison simply because of availability of staffing and capacity to provide the scopes that we wanted to be able to provide in those two locations. And so hopefully now we'll have some additional providers and be able to shift to resuming care in Sheboygan. But the decision today doesn't do an awful lot to change the operations. As you noted, we resumed care in September. But moving forward, there's still a lot of work to do. And what I mean by that is while we celebrate this decision and we think it's the correct decision and we're thrilled, we still don't have a protection for abortion in Wisconsin. And so really that's sort of the next step. We need to protect abortion access and really work to expand that access as well.
If you don't mind me asking, what's the path forward for that?
So there's really two paths to achieve protection and expansion of abortion. One would be a legislative path. So the state legislature could pass a law that sort of affirmatively states that there's a right to abortion. There could be a constitutional amendment, and by that I mean a ballot initiative could be put forward for the voters. That would be the legislative path to protecting abortion. The legal path to protecting abortion would really be for a court in Wisconsin, ultimately the Wisconsin Supreme Court, to interpret Wisconsin's constitution as already enshrining the right to access abortion. And then beyond that, when I'm talking about expanding abortion access, I'm really talking about repealing some of the laws on our books that make Wisconsin one of the most restrictive states. So even prior to the Dobbs decision, Wisconsin was considered one of the more restrictive states when it came to abortion access because of sort of the slew of laws, including, a prohibition of the use of telemedicine, waiting periods, mandatory ultrasounds, physician only, same physician, etc. So really looking at repealing those laws either legislatively or challenging those laws in court.
Now, because we've had here in Wisconsin kind of an on-again, off-again series of rulings on abortion, I'm curious about a chilling effect for people seeking abortions. Are they already accustomed to not getting those here?
So I think that people, weren't always aware that abortion wasn't accessible in Wisconsin until they needed an abortion. However, since we've made our announcement and resumed services back in September, I don't have exact numbers, but what I can say is that within 24 hours of making that announcement, all of the appointments were that were available were filled, and we're currently scheduling about 2 weeks out. So that just really demonstrates that this is healthcare that people need all the time. It's routine, it's safe, and hopefully with this ruling, other healthcare systems will feel the confidence and have the reassurance that they need to know that they will not be prosecuted for providing this essential healthcare to their patients.
The lawsuit itself targets 3 Wisconsin district attorneys from the 3 counties that house abortion clinics in Wisconsin. Now, in the wake of Tuesday's decision, the Republican DA from Sheboygan County announced that he would appeal the lower court's ruling. This likely sets the case up to be heard before the state Supreme Court, which has a new liberal majority. We spoke with Howard Schwaber, an expert on constitutional law, about where the case goes from here.
I think it's really important to recognize this is not legally significant, it's politically significant. So back in September, we already had a Wisconsin judge determine that the 1849, the old abortion statute, isn't really an abortion statute at all. It's a ban on feticide. Feticide is, imagine if you shot a pregnant woman in the stomach, or in a car accident that caused a miscarriage, or had industrial accidents that resulted in the loss of a pregnancy. Right? These are all very different from a medical procedure in which the woman consents and the doctor's involved. So we already had a ruling that said this old law didn't apply to what nowadays we call abortion. That did not mean we were thrust into chaos. There's a 1985 statute in Wisconsin that comported what was then the U.S. Supreme Court precedent and said the state there was a right to abortion up to the point of viability, and after that there can be restrictions. Of course, the U.S. Supreme Court in Dobbs overruled Roe versus Wade and said this is no longer secured by the U.S. Constitution. So the really big question for everyone involved in this issue is, what does our local state constitution involve? And that's what this lawsuit and this ruling is about. This is basically a vehicle to get this question to the state Supreme Court.
While the Dane County decision was heralded by some, many pro-life groups were frustrated by the decision. Joining us now is Gracie Skogman, the Legislative and PAC Director for Wisconsin Right to Life, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Will.
So I want to start with your initial reaction to that Tuesday decision.
We are, of course, disappointed, but we're also very concerned about the reasoning in this decision. This law was in effect in our state for over 100 years. So we have a lot of precedent to go on, and we're just very concerned how the judge came to this determination based on that historical precedent.
And it's been a little more than a year now since the Dobbs decision. So you had a decision that re-invoked the state's abortion ban, and then a decision now that has gone back to pre-Dobbs scenario here in Wisconsin. What has your organization been kind of doing in that post-Dobbs, kind of this interim place here?
We have been ramping up our efforts to support women here in the state. So we offer emergency grants, for example, for housing for women who want to carry their pregnancy to term, but maybe they have an insecure housing situation. So that's where we're focusing, is partnering with pregnancy resource centers here in the state to ensure that women have what they need to choose life for their children.
And so we're assuming that this decision will be appealed.
Yes.
It's already started with one of the plaintiffs in the case, or the defendants in the case, looking to appeal this. Is there any role that you or other pro-life groups will be taking in that appeal process at all?
We're looking at all of our options currently. But as of today, our focus does remain at the pregnancy resource centers. I spoke with one today. They continue to see an increase in clients even this week. They're seeing larger numbers than ever before. So we know that there's a need. We know that there are women here in our state who are in need of critical support. And truthfully, I think we can find bipartisan solutions for some of that. So that's where we are focused.
Gracie Skogman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Will.